Hello, everyone. Before we get started with episode 49 of FECast, this is my last chance. Just a few quick plugs. First of all, FECast is put on by the Friends of Eternal, which is a Discord server, which you can join in the description of this. So I strongly recommend that you do that because it's the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. Second of all, FECast is made possible by our generous patrons at patreon.com. And this week we have a new patron. So thank you very much, Andrew Freeling, for donating to the show. And also a huge thank you to our continuing patrons, Cotillion, Alcide Bava, Work Done Son, Chamomile, Chrissier, D-Dub, and Yeast Out. Thank you so much for helping support the show. One last thing, a huge thank you to our editor, SRFS, who makes this process so much easier for myself and Stormblessed, and without them, we would really just be in a lot of trouble trying to get this together and out every week. So thank you so much for their continued work on FECast. Anyway, without any further ado, let's get on to episode 49 of FECast. This is my last chance where we talk about the Last Chance Qualifier for Worlds coming up this weekend. Hello, everyone, and welcome to FECast episode 49. This is my last chance. And today, we'll be talking about all of the updates we have for the Eternal Celebration, 9 new spoilers from the new mini set Bastion Rising coming out November 4th, a new promo that is in the game, and finally, the decks that we think are going to be good for this Last Chance Qualifier, the last opportunity for players to qualify for Worlds 2020. And here with me, back from his short break, we have Stormblessed. Welcome back to the cast, Stormblessed.
Hello, it's good to be back. Glad to be here. I hope you all had a good time last week getting some other Worlds competitors, but I'm glad to be back.
All right, let's start with our announcements. So I haven't been able to watch any of these, but there have been daily dev streams at noon, and the VOD should be up on Twitch when you're watching this. Stormblessed, have you caught these?
I've caught a couple, caught parts of it in between, my daily responsibilities. It's fun, like today it was BK and Corey, but when LSV was on, it was classic BK and LSV banter. Today BK got to avoid being bullied, and that was exciting for BK presumably. They're just playing a bunch of like meme decks together, and it's kind of fun, right? These aren't like the tier 1 decks, right? Today was all about relic nonsense. There was one all about tribal nonsense, and the nonsense is fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm sad that I haven't been able to tune in, but those should be available on the Direwolf Twitch. Hopefully they'll get them on YouTube at some point, but until then, you can check them out on Twitch. Also, we are in the midst of the Eternal Celebration, and if you've been playing at all, you probably know that you have every single card available in your collection. And one neat side effect of this is that we are able to see how much our collection is worth if we were to dust everything into Shiftstone. I know some people have accidentally or deliberately clicked the button, but nothing happens, fortunately, because I was half asleep and I just clicked the dust all button and nothing happened. So I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I haven't clicked the button now because I heard it wasn't able to be clicked. Sonny, how much dust do you have available?
It's like 1.4 million, I think. It's actually not an absolute ton. Like, I have most of the things that I need to play, but it's not a ridiculous amount.
I think I have like 1.07 million or something like that.
Oh, okay. I've definitely been beat by some people that are not as into the competitive scene as I am. So, yeah.
I was pretty sad though to discover that we were given one of everything, including alt art cards, because I was hoping to make like a post on Eternal Archive being like, here's my pay to win deck, and it's just like only alt art cards. Just like here's my Shadowlands Guide, Permafrost, Light the Fuse, Seek Power deck, like.
Yeah, but we didn't get all premiums, did we?
No, so that is the one thing that you can swag on, especially if you had alt art premiums, you could swag with those.
Yeah, that makes me kind of sad, but oh well. All right, so as we mentioned, the Last Chance Qualifier is this weekend. In order to qualify that, make sure you get 7 wins in one of the events going on this week. You have unlimited chances to do so, and each entry will cost 4,000 gold. But make sure you get a 7-win run in one of those. Then you'll be able to play in this weekend's event.
Yeah, the weekend's event will be your classic 28 game day 1 cut to day 2. Send out deck lists like always. And so it should be interesting to see, who shows up, who's qualified for this, right? Because it's kind of different than it usually is. It's open entry, but you do have to have a sort of pre-entry, right? So it could be that the competition is a little bit fiercer than normal, or it could be that because of the cheapness of having to only get one 7-win run for 4,000 gold, that you could find more people showing up, especially because this is Eternal Celebration, right? So hopefully we get more people showing up than before, and maybe the cutoffs are a little bit more stringent.
I've seen some people talking on social media about Eternal and how they like it, and I've noticed some new people entering in the Discord. So hopefully that's a good sign. I think it's worthy of the attention.
I mean, I know we're biased, but it's cool. Like I think Direwolf had sponsored Noxious, who said that they liked the game and said they were gonna stream some more of it, even unsponsored streams of it, which is cool.
That is awesome.
And so finally, a final announcement is we've finally gotten word from Yottabyte about their card back. And it turns out that if you log in starting October 29th until November 5th as part of Eternal Celebration, you will receive a free card back courtesy of the one and only Yottabyte. So be sure to be on the lookout for that one. The card back is very swaggin'.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I didn't know about that until you brought it up in the show doc. And I just think that's really awesome that, we've had a bunch of community design cards, the other big ticket item being a card back. We finally have one designed by the community. And, well, good job, Yottabyte. Congratulations. And thank you for all of your hard work.
Yeah, so those are the announcements. I guess this is kind of like another announcement, but it's not the same type of announcement. There's a promo quest going on right now. Until some point in the future, there's a card called Celebration that you can obtain once per day. Although currently you will get 4 of them for free just for having, because it's Eternal Celebration. But the card Celebration is a 2-cost spell with no factions required, and it says play a random 1-cost unit. Amplify 1 increases the card's ability by 1. So basically, you pay 2, you get a random 1 drop. You pay 3, you get a random 2 drop. You pay 7, you get a random 6 drop. You pay 11, you get a First Flame. You pay 13, you get a Spirit of Resistance guaranteed. Bigger than that, well, sometimes you can get XXs for that. But yeah, so there are some interesting things there, especially with, like I said, if you can get up to 12 or 13, you can sort of guarantee what it is. Aside from that, maybe the most interesting, although there's probably better options, but putting a salvo market means that salvo markets can have any unit on the curve, right? So you don't only get a 2-drop unit, you can get a 4-drop if you need to or whatever. Sunny wishes it cost 1. I also kind of wish it cost 1.
Yeah, it doesn't seem very good at all, but it's a fun little card. I wouldn't be surprised if we had an event at some point where your deck is just power and this card or something.
Oh my god, that would be so funny.
Yeah, just for the madness.
I'd like that. Although I guess Celebration also will result in some interesting meme decks, right? Like I don't know if you ever tried a Delph duel. Are the fun decks where it's the people play Delph and nothing but cards that can help you get Delph out of your deck. You could try like a Celebration style thing where if we get enough cards like this, we can have some meme action going on, which is cool.
Yeah, Delph duels are a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that format. So this is a card that's not too constructed worthy, but we do have a new set coming out on November 4th. That's a Wednesday. And it's called Bastion Rising, and we have 9 of the 23 cards that are going to be from that set spoiled so far. So let's talk about them and share how we feel about them. The first one's a really interesting one. So it's a 0-cost shadow spell. It costs double shadow. Fall of House Roa. The Fall of House Roa's cost is increased by your health while it's in your hand. Your units get +2/+2 deadly and lifesteal this turn. So this is really interesting, right? The quote normal way to play it is like if you're at 5 life, you can play this for 5 and then presumably gain a lot of life to get back into it. But if you've got some shenanigans going on where you can play it from the top of your deck, if you can give it warp with something like Glimpse the Possibilities, right? Then you can play it for 0 and potentially do some cool stuff that way. What do you think about this card, Stormblessed, and what applications do you have brewing for it?
I want this card to be good because it looks very fun. I don't really know what to think about it. It's a very weird card. My instinct is that it's probably not very good because it does require you to be at like 5 or 7 if it's just in your hand. It can trigger 5-cost matter spells if that's a thing, if you're low enough but also can still play it. Yeah, I think the easiest way, the most obvious application that Sunny said is the Glimpse the Possibilities deck, because it can sort of help push your units through, right? Like you play a couple of charge units and then you give them all +2/+2 lifesteal and deadly. It's this turn though, so it's a weird card. Are there any other ways to just like
To play it for free? Not that I can think
or to
of.
utilize that it costs 0 in your deck? Because you can't like Whispering Wind it. You can't old draw it like because old draw plus Haunting Scream was a cool combo back in the day.
Yeah, I can't think of any ways. This also just seems like most of the time it's going to be worse than that card from the last campaign from Awakening.
Oh yeah,
That the time spell. I forget what it's called, but if you have like time and justice, I want to say you get +2/+2 and
yeah,
deadly.
yeah. I think this is a card that has a lot of potential in the future. Um, Possibly
Yeah,
currently, there's just things me and Sunny can't envision because this is such a weird card. But certainly keep an eye on this one because in like 3 years' times, whatever, if we ever get like a 3-cost unit that's like summon, play a spell from your deck that costs 1 or less randomly, whatever. It's like, aha! I will
yeah,
have this is my only card that costs 1 or less in my deck, and then suddenly you get this effect for free or something. So,
yeah. That's really good.
uh,
Yeah, it falls into the Reap category of things, right? Utterly useless
yes,
until it's broken.
yeah. Reap was just like a joke card, then suddenly it's like, oh look, it has busted applications with Surge. But yeah, so right now, possibly there's something going on here, but probably me and Sunny can't either can't figure out or there is nothing going on. But keep an eye out for the future. So our next card is Erica Inferno Wing. She is 6 fire for a 6/5 flying quick draw, and when she attacks, double the attack of your other attacking units. She's just a nonsense Valkyrie that's not very good.
Yes, that is a good way of putting it. Like maybe if she costs 5, you could think about something screaming, but even then she doesn't buff herself, so yeah, probably not really amounting to anything.
Yeah, just to as a brief aside, a lot of these 9 cards I really like them because they're not very good draft cards, right? And that's sort of the main benefit I think for putting out a mini campaign like this is you can put out a number of cards that just aren't good in draft or like wouldn't play well in a draft environment more or less. Whereas like Erica would be like a legendary draft bomb that would play reasonably well in draft and be like a game winning draft bomb, right? Whereas like Fault Row is just like a terrible draft card, right? And a lot of these will fit under this like a fun card, a card that's worth having in the game, but not a good card in a draft environment. So I like so far these 9 cards for that reason alone.
So talking about a card that would be terrible in draft, our next one is Pumpworks Monstrosity. It's a 5-cost factionless card. It's a 0/0, but has +1/+1 for every 10 cards in your deck. And its entomb is shuffle your void into your deck. So you can do a Lumen Reclaimer impression with this card, but it also just doesn't seem very big. Like if your deck is, if you start with a 75 card deck and you play up until turn 5, you probably have 60 some cards left in your deck, if not 50 some. So it's like a 5/5 or a 6/6. Recycling the void's kind of cool, but comes at a pretty big cost with this
Yeah.
one.
In draft, this card would be a 3/3 or a 2/2, so it'd be just like complete garbage in draft, as Sunny alluded to. This card's not for us, Sunny. This card is for the people that like building 150 card decks, and of which they deserve to have some fun every now and again. So I like this card existing, but it is not for us.
Well, even so, like the rate for a 5-cost vanilla unit that dies when it gets silenced is like you have to have something that's absolutely huge, right?
I mean, Sunny, this would be like a 5-cost 12/12 or a 5-cost 10/10 in that deck.
I guess, but with no evasion or other
I
abilities.
think a 5-cost 12/12 is a pretty like again. If you're playing a 150 card deck, Sunny, you don't care about the losing to a silence effect, right? You're already playing a 150 card deck, so like you're not like, aha, I'm gonna be super competitive. Like I think this card's worth having because it would be fun to play with an 150 card deck.
All right. Speaking of cards that are for people that are not us, the next card, Brati Bastion's Hope, is a 1-cost Combre card. It has time and justice influence requirements. It's a 0/3, and it says your units can attack even if their attack is 0 or less. And when this attacks, each of your units deal battle damage equal to their health this turn instead of their attack, and it's a Minotaur Soldier. So this is a pretty cool card. You could potentially play it on turn 1 with like a Combre insignia and then attack for 3. The downside is that on defense, it's just a 0/3. And also, if it gets silenced, that's not so great. And it's kind of tough to play on turn 1.
So why do you think it's not for us? Is it just because you think it's not?
Well, I mean, you're probably building a deck that has a lot of like lopsided stats, right? Like 0x or whatever, or like 1x or something where the x is really high. But you have to have this in play, and it dies to like everything, right?
Well, it doesn't die to everything. It doesn't die to annihilate.
Okay, it dies to torch, suffocate, defiance,
Sure.
all these things. Any silence effect, open contract.
Like so do the other one drops. This is still a 1-cost 3/3 when it attacks. I think people are like being possibly too cute when they're like, I'm gonna play it with Hagra and have a 0/8. I think Brody could be there. Possibly you should be looking more into things like Tokus. Things like you have a generically good unit that also can benefit from Brody more so than Hagra, which is just a unit that's more or less not as great without Brody. I think this card could potentially fit in with a different card later if you're trying to play it with Tokus. I think this card kind of has potential. It's a weird card though to say for sure, but the power is there in a lot of ways. So
It feels like without redundancy, though, it's just not going to be able to do its thing as often as you'd like, and the deck would just be too inconsistent.
no, that's why I think that you don't want to play it with the Hagras and stuff. If we had like a second copy of this effect in like a relic form, I'd be like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
But because we have only one copy of the effect, I think going for the butts route is not as good. But I think going for making some of your units a little bit better, like if you play this with Tokus, right? Tokus is just a generically good unit in your Combre decks, in your Combre aggro decks even, and this is going to make Tokus just a little bit better, right? While by itself, it's already a 1-cost 3/3 in a Combre aggro deck. I think you don't want to build around this card in a sense because we don't have redundancy with the effect yet, but I think it still could be good by itself even.
All right, we'll see.
Our next card is potentially really good, but also potentially like really crap, but should be really fun nevertheless. This is Beacon of the Reach. It is a 3-cost relic that requires 1 of each influence, so you need all 5 influence. It has summon, create, and draw a random card, a la Nyctotraxion. When you play the latest card created by Beacon of the Reach, create and draw a new random card.
It's an infinity for 1.
So, the downside, of course, is that if you get a bad card, or if the card you roll is like Arachnidon, you play this on turn 3, and then you're like, aha, I'm going to get so much value, and then you get Arachnidon, which is a 7-cost 5/6 overwhelm with no other abilities. The card suddenly looks a lot worse.
Yeah, what if you get a meltdown and there are just no attachments, right?
There is one trick here. You play a lot of plunder effects with this card. Because if you plunder this card and turn to a power, you play the power, you will get a new card, which already turns it into a cycle.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah, so I think if you're playing this card, you want to be playing like Desert Alchemists and Maveloth Huntresses. Maybe not Maveloth Huntresses. Or maybe you just go all in with influence and don't care about your influence. I don't know. But I do think you want to play plunder with this.
Oh, this seems so hard.
Or what is it called? Good idea at the time or whatever. Just turn your random card to a different random card.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, so I think if there's a transform effects, if you can transform this with plunder, that'll be the way to go with Beacon of the Reach.
The serpent guy.
Yeah, Mastery Hunter, I guess, but basically plunder's the way to go, I think.
It does seem like a sweet new take on a Knucklebones style of deck. I don't think this is going to be competitively viable, at least not without a lot of shenaniganery, because the random cards are just like so bad, and it's going to be so tough to go through enough of them to get one that is worth something. Okay, the next one is the long-awaited bride or sister or relative of Diogo Malaga. This is Okessa Malaga. She's a 5-cost 4/4 in Praxis. Costs 1 fire and 1 time. When a relic goes to your void, create and draw a treasure trove. Once per turn, you may exhaust 2 of your other units to play a relic from your hand. So I think the idea with this is you've got a Grenadin drone, you play Okessa, you exhaust the 2 drones, and you play something like Pit of Lenecta or Martyr's Chains, some huge expensive relic.
First off, lore hypothesis. I think that Okessa Malaga is actually Diogo Malaga's great grandchild. I think she is a descendant of Malaga. I think Bastion Rising is we're going back into Shadowlands. We're being displaced into the future this time. So that's my hot lore take. I think we're going into the future.
Oh man, I thought it would be cool to have like both halves of a marriage between Okessa and Diogo if that was a thing, but yours seems much more likely.
That marriage sounds pretty sad though. Diogo's just like wandering away to like do his rock concerts, like leaving Okessa behind or something.
Well, I mean, maybe like there's some sort of beneficiary relationship where like he finds the relics and she studies them or something, you know?
But onto this card. This card is cool because if your relic dies, if they kill it, you still at least get a treasure trove. It also works if you mill relics, right? If you play like Azurite Prixis, and your relic goes to the void through any capacity, you you get a treasure trove. So if you discard relics, if you mill your own relics, you get troves. And its ability, the fact that it doesn't cost any power, means that you can just play it forever, right? The difference between it and Governor Sahin is that Governor Sahin costs 7 effectively, where this costs 5, but you have to have 2 units in play. But you are in Praxis, which is the faction of tokens, unlike, say, like the 4 primal 3-cost spell that you had to exhaust 2 units and gave the top card of your deck Destiny.
Yeah, well, I think that was part of Argent Depth's theme for Skycrag, where you
Sure,
have a lot of units. But
But
yeah, you're right. It's a lot easier to get multiple units in Praxis.
and it's also a lot less influence heavy. So, and it's also a 4/4
Yeah.
body, which is obviously undercosted for 5, but it's still not terrible, right? Like we used to play Jotun Hurlers back in the day, and they had to nerf that because that body was way too powerful. So, okay, so our next card is 7 Primal Shadow for a 4/4. It is Ukzu Carnivorous Bloom, and it has some wild text. Whenever a unit goes to your void, while Uzu is in your deck, Uzu gets randomly one of like 9 abilities. It either gets +5 -1, +3 attack, +2 +3 health, -1 +5, Aegis, Berserk, Deadly, Decay, Killer, Lifesteal, Overwhelm, Quick Draw, or Ambush.
This one's really cool. I mean, I haven't figured out if it's good or not. I'm thinking like, I think the first thing that comes to people's mind is some sort of Reanimator deck where you're playing Malaise and Swearfolk and cards like that. And I'm thinking that like in a reasonable amount of time, you'll often have about 6 units hit the void. This is not done by any sort of mathematical thing, but it also has to be while it's in your deck, right? So like
Yeah.
if it's the first card to go to your void and you're planning on reanimating it, or if it's in your hand and cards are going to the void, it doesn't get the benefit. So you have to figure out how to get a lot of cards to the void and then dig it out there. Like if you have enough units go to the void, then you could potentially just have something that has Aegis, something huge that has Aegis, Overwhelm, and Ambush, and basically just, put this in at the end of the opponent's turn, go to your turn and just kill them.
I mean, Sonny, if you're going to live the dream, why not just declare Uzu to be an 84 killer Overwhelm Aegis that wins you the game on the spot?
Yes.
I wish Uzu worked in your hand. I know why it doesn't work in the void, because that would just be ridiculous. You just
Yeah,
flip
that
over
would
your
be
deck and then
ridiculous.
be like, aha! There wouldn't be any intricacy in building the deck. Although I wish it kind of worked in your hand. Although I guess I can see why, because you just keep waiting until it grows in your hand. So I guess that makes sense. One fun bench ability is 4 faction Todas. Remember Battery's Extodia deck? It puts a lot of units in the void and draws lots of cards. So you could use this as your finisher, maybe, if you want to be cute.
Yeah, well, there actually is a deck that is putting a lot of units in the void, and that's the Callous Rat Cage deck,
Yeah.
which we'll talk about later, like Stonescar Relics. So like that puts a lot of units in the void. It doesn't have primal, but that could be something a different path to go on rather than trying to do something with Reanimator.
And of course, just remember, if you build a deck around it, your deck's name is Uzu. What's this? Sonny, do you know the meme? Uwu memes. Uwu.
No, I don't.
You don't know Uwu? You don't know
Let the
Uwu? Oh
record
my goodness.
state that I did not laugh or do anything resembling a laugh during that time.
Let the record state
Make
that
sure that's
all
in
of the
the
audience laughed.
SRFS.
100% of the audience laughed, and
Uh-huh.
Sonny is just a buzzkill who doesn't know fun.
Okay. Yes, okay. All right, the next card, Astri Patrol. This is a 2-cost time unit, only single time influence. It's a 2/2 flying and +1/+1 for each remaining power you have more than the number of power cards you played. So this is a really interesting one.
It's our first soldier bird in Eternal.
Oh, okay, sure. Um, so I think that something that can be interesting with this one is if you play something like Initiative Sands, then this card, then or Initiative Sands, then this card plus Initiative Sands, you could potentially be attacking with a 4/4 flyer on turn 3. But I think things have to go pretty right for you. You have to have accelerants that survive. I guess Tokus goes really well with this card, but you also have to care about having a cheap flying unit that you have to attack with before you play cards.
Yeah, I think this card's really interesting, and again, I think the other cards, aside from that one Fire Legend, this is a card that would be terrible in a draft format, right? In a draft format, it'd basically be Locust, 2/2 for 2 and flying, which is fine, but it would just confuse the heck out of people in a draft format. But yeah, no, this card's really interesting. I'm not sure if it's there yet. I think our two best maximum power enablers are Tokus and Initiative of the Sands, and I don't think there's a third one that compares them, right? So I'm not sure if we have enough support for it. But if we got a couple more, it could be there. If you work to make a Sky Snapper that you can play on two, is that good? I don't know. This is a card that I think could potentially fit in maybe with the Brody deck, because if you're playing Tokus to enable Azri, Brody helps enable Tokus. You're playing 1-drops for Azri. You're playing 1-drops Initiative of the Sand. You can kind of put it together, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of cards that work with it. There are a few relics like the Oasis that gives +2 maximum power, and there's also stuff like Mask, which can generate a ton of power, but generally isn't considered a very good card. I mean, the base case isn't that bad, like a 2/2 flyer for
No.
2. It's a card that hasn't made a lot of traction in Eternal, but like if you just evaluate it based on that, it's not that bad. I mean, people play like 2/3s for 2 or 3/2s for 2.
Direwolf nerfed the 2/2 for 2 that grows, right? They nerfed the Tinker Overseer, right? I don't think I like it with Oasis or cards like or relics like that, because I think if you're playing a 2/2 flyer for 2 or 3/3 flyer for 2, your goal is to be attacking with it, which is why I think it pairs much better with Mana Dorks. If we had like a maximum power relic that like did a thing, maybe like a Pillar of Progress, if your goal is to like also play with like a relic weapon potentially, because Pillar of Progress actually has a different effect aside from just maximum power.
Eh.
I think you really want to play with Mana Dorks.
Yeah, maybe. It's also weird that you don't want to play it with anything that you have to play before combat. Like even combat tricks aren't things that you're interested in. You have to be playing a very like typical time game plan where everything you play is worth just playing after combat because it doesn't have initiative, basically. You just have big things. So it's in like a really weird spot. It's not too hard to think of ways of making this big, but like, is the work that you want to do for it really worth it that much when it's going to be a 2/2 most of the time?
Yeah. The art in this card is one of the things that makes me think that we're maybe in the future. It kind of looks like it's like a future Argenport. We're not having dinosaurs, we're having birds now, and the architecture is really large and in charge instead of being like a regular city. It looks like some sort of, future city.
All right.
Our next card is a card that's gotten a number of buzz, our last card for today. Grand Suppressor is a bold adventurer. It is a Verit. It is a 2-cost factionless unit with 2/3, the best stat line. And it has cards can't use summon abilities.
And obviously, summon abilities are incredibly common and eternal and powerful, and the reason why you play a lot of cards. But keep in mind that, playing this has a huge cost. Like, 2-drops are pretty powerful. Are you going to play this over your Kira? Are you going to play this over your Owlhead?
Even hand golem.
Is this going to be better than, I don't know, what's another 2-drop that's insane? Like the 2/3 Black Hall War Leader. There's a huge cost to playing this card in your deck, but it does do something really, really powerful.
It also does shut off your own cards, right? So you can't play summon abilities either. Cards this card shuts off include, it shuts off Jack, it shuts off Zombie Icaria, it shuts off all merchants, it shuts off a lot of cards. So I don't know how to feel about this card, to be perfectly honest. We haven't really seen a card like this because we've seen a couple hate cards, but no hate card that seems just as powerful as this in a lot of ways. Like Tokus is technically a hate card, but really you're playing it because it gives you the maximum power and it has its twist ability. It sometimes just shuts down a sacrifice deck and you're just loving it. But like this is the first sort of hate card that I can see being like actually good by itself without having other text on it.
Well, it has to do something, right? If it's just a 2/3 with no abilities because your opponent isn't playing units or they're not playing abilities with or units with summon abilities, then it's a really embarrassing card.
Are there any decks that have units that don't play summon abilities? I don't think so.
What about like Yetis or something? Aggro decks are generally the type of thing where you'd expect this type of thing.
I think this is fine versus Yetis. It's a 2/3 for 2 that blocks a Yeti in trades. That's fine. Yeti, what they're gonna do? Blazing Salvo. The only thing they have to remove it is like Torch. If you're doing Torch, you've got a little bit of a tempo loss, and that's fine. Your other 2-drop would also get torched.
All right. If we ever have like Combre aggro, this would be really bad against it because then you're up against 2-cost 3/3s,
One
and
cost 3/3s.
you're also up against, huh?
One cost 3/3s with the Brody.
I guess so. But like you're up against 2-cost 3/3s and other just like fat units that don't really have summon text. Like, yeah, maybe it shuts off the summon ability of Valkyrie Enforcer. It's still a 3/3 in the air. That's going to be a problem. I just think that there's a really big cost for this card. It's going to be insane in certain metagames, but it's also just like you have to really think about playing this card. You can't just jam it in the deck and expect it to pull its weight, unless the time is ripe for it or unless your deck is built in a certain way to take advantage of it.
I'm going to disagree slightly. I don't think there's a huge cost to this card. I think there's about the same cost to this card as there would be for any other card in your deck, if that makes sense. I think if you want to play this card, you have to have a deck that wants this card's effect, right? You want to have a deck where you want either the unit or you want the ability, or both even. What if you play this in your Combre aggro deck because you don't have many summon abilities, right? Shut down your opponent from interacting with your board, and then you also get a unit that can attack. And if you have Brody, this can attack as a 3/3.
Oh, okay. I mean, like, I could see it in something like Expedition Cumbre, where your choices for 2-drops aren't that great, but I would have to imagine that your choices for 2-drops at this point are good enough that playing a 2/3 that like this is not that huge.
I also definitely think this is more of an Expedition card than a Throne card, because Expedition relies on its summon effects a lot more than Throne. Because Expedition also, doesn't have nearly as powerful unitless decks, if any exist. I mean, you have 50 power Worldpyre deck. But most decks have units, right? And most of the best units in decks have summon abilities, right? So I think that there could be a Combre aggro deck in Expedition that employs this as a 2-drop that wants just a generically decent body, has Brody to have some synergy with this, and can use the effect pretty effectively.
All right, yeah, you might be right. I'm thinking my brain's just in throne mode, because we have the last chance qualifier. But you bring up a pretty good point. For as far as like Expedition Cumbre, also like Legion decks that are aggressive generally don't have a ton of summon abilities.
Yeah.
But it's really cool to have a card that interacts in a way that we haven't had before. We haven't had any cards that shut off summon abilities, unless you count something like Ubzot silencing cards in hand. But even then, that doesn't really do it.
Yeah, so I think this card's going to be very cool, and I expect potentially this card will become the new Blight Moth.
The one that people keep on complaining about, and
Yep.
is like a totally fair and reasonable card. Yeah, okay.
I mean, Blight Moth. I think there's some arguments that Blight Moth can just randomly hose decks that aren't even implying to be tribal, like oh, it just sometimes gets Stonescar, not even trying to have Gunslinger synergy. I think that argument's pretty reasonable, but I think it is ultimately balanced. Anyways, let's not get into Blight Moth. So those are the 9 out of 23 Bastion Rising cards, and this will be coming out in just about a weekish at this point. So I hope I'm planning on enjoying these cards. At the very least, I think Combre Expedition aggro seems pretty interesting now that I've labeled these like 1 and 2 drops as potentially being good in it. But yeah, so this week, the thing everyone's concerned about though is the last chance qualifier, right? You have the 7 wins that you need to qualify, and then you have your classic 28 game setup. So me and Sunny are just going to go over the rundown on some decks that we think are pretty decent in the current metagame.
Yeah, and before we get into that, I just want to say a thing about Throne. I think in Throne, you should just play what you're comfortable with. Like, I feel like the edges aren't huge. They have more to do with like how well you are adapting at what your opponent's playing, like knowing what the matchup is and what's important there, rather than like having a deck that's just, head and shoulders above the metagame, especially after the nerfs that we got. I think that the last Throne tournament was really close to being a really good metagame. I think Kira was too good, and Stonescar may have been too good too in some way. I think I like the direction that Stonescar took. Anyway, let's talk about the deck that is everywhere, that everyone's talking about, and that is Severin Reap.
Yeah, this is what I would call the level 1 deck of the format, the deck that I expect to be the most popular deck you will face. Severin Reap, sometimes even, sometimes not even. Basically, it's just going for Severin and Reap to win the game. There were a couple games recently on ladder where, like a week ago, where I was on turn 5 and I was like, hey, take 1 turn off. If my opponent doesn't go Severin plus double Reap, I can win the game. And then of course my opponent went Severin plus double Reap, and I'm like, well, next game. But I think this is the deck that if there's anything that gets targeted with a balance patch after this, it'll just be Severin or Reap, because of just how obnoxious the deck can be sometimes, or feel obnoxious. It just can sometimes get on your nerves, so it's get a little grating. But yeah, it is powerful. It has a decent engine, and the Xenon stuff has proven itself to be viable even without Curtain Call, and it's got a reasonable finisher. Personally, I think that if I played a Severin and Reap deck, In Throne, I would play Reap in the market and not play 4 in the main deck because I would hate to ever draw Reap without Severin. I'd hope to not need 2 to win the game. Well, Sonny, what do you think about Severin and Reap decks?
Well, if you're playing one in the market, that means that you're probably not playing an even deck, and I actually think the even deck's pretty good. Like, first of all, I think this deck is a reasonable choice for the tournament. I'm not saying that you shouldn't play this deck or anything, but people really like their Severin Reap, right? And they also really like even-handed Golem. And when you can put the two together, you just get like the perfect storm of decks that people love playing and decks that people hate playing against. So I think that's what's going on here and why it's so popular. Uh, it really sucks that, if you want to play an even version, then you just have to roll the dice and hope that you draw a Severin with all of your reaps. But I kind of feel like that's just the way to go because a lot of what the deck is trying to do just works so well even in even deck. There's so few non-even cards that you would want for a deck like this. So it is cool to put the cards in your market, but just having another 2-drop that's insane and even-handed Golem is really nice as it turns out.
One of the big benefits of even-handed Golem. If you have Reap and even-handed Golem in your deck, obviously even-handed Golem allows you to dig pretty deep. Actually, it turns out that 2 cards is a lot of cards, right? So you just get to see more cards. So you're just more likely to find the Severin plus Reap package.
Yeah.
There's a reason that Severin plus Reap is the level 1 deck. I think it's a very valid choice to bring.
Yeah. If you want to be prepared for it, just make sure you have a deck that has like Annihilates or Ice Bolts or something, and in a situation where you can hold it up for the Severin. Because if they try to Reap and Decimate and they lose their Severin in response, they are very, very far behind. And their deck, a lot of the times, these decks don't have a ton going for it outside of that.
Yeah, it's nice that the deck's finisher has a pretty massive weakness. While the finisher is powerful, if you play Annihilate, Ice Bolt, or Equivocate, or probably some other fast spells like New Battle at the Gates tech, which me and Sunny laughed about earlier before recording.
Yeah, don't play Battle of the Gates.
If you play it in response or Battle of the Gates after in response, you basically just shut it down and get a 2-for-1 while reducing their maximum power, and can pretty reliably set yourself up for the win. So the other level 1 deck of the current format would be the Yetis, right? We unnerfed Snowcrest Yeti. It's now a 2/1 Aegis for 1 again, and Yetis is back in the meta.
Yeah, that buff plus the nerfs to Stonescar makes me think that Yetis is the premier aggro deck of the format. It does have a pretty big weakness to Blightmoth, but that's just something you're going to have to live with. Blightmoth and Lightning Storm. I think that if you're playing a sweeper right now, you shouldn't play Hailstorm. You should play Lightning Storm because it just costs 1 less and it hits most of the cards that you'd want to be sweeping away. So yeah, I think that Yetis is in a really good spot now that it has something to fill out the one drop slot in the curve. Definitely a great aggro deck. Probably it's weaker to Blightmoth, but probably better against most other things than Stonescar. And people love their Yetis deck, so I would expect to see a lot of Yetis this weekend.
If you want to target the Yetis, the main way to go about that is to play Snowball Zero and play Jotun Hurler. Turns out all Yetis are X1s.
Yeah, and importantly, their site only has 1 health.
That's also true as well. So I think Yetis is a powerful and reliable deck. And, if you play a couple games Yetis on ladder, find out the deck works, if you really just want to qualify quickly, this would be a pretty reasonable way to get your 7 wins. Like, lots of people get their 7 wins with the Yetis deck because it's fast games. So even if you happen to lose 3, you can just hop into another set of event games and, presumably get there as long as you have a reasonable win rate with Yetis.
Yeah. All right, the next one is my take on Reanimator, Reapanimator. I think that at this point I'm comfortable in saying that playing Reanimator with Severin it's pretty clear to me that Severin is better than Shadow Icaria in Reanimator. And if you're playing Severin, you might as well have like a single Reap in the market. But like this deck, I'm not even sure that you're supposed to be playing odd numbered cards. I guess it's nice in Reanimator because then you can go market for Grasping at Shadows without having to go broker or some nonsense like that. But yeah, I feel like the changes I made to the deck make it a little more consistent, and that is what the deck needed. Being able to Vara for Severin and then play a power and then get other stuff back is just like a huge game changer rather than Icaria kill something, which seems nice, but like that's not what you needed to win the game most of the time with those Reanimator decks. So I think Reapanimator it's like a fine combo deck if that's what you're into. I don't think it's breaking any metagames, and you're definitely super soft to a gavel.
Yeah, but the thing is that no one ever plays Gavel. Even if we're bringing it up here, I doubt anyone will actually bring Gavel because no one ever respects Reanimator at any tournament ever.
Yeah, I mean, when I was playing Kira deck in the last tournament, and I thought that Reanimator was on my radar, I just ended up taking the Gavel out of the market because I didn't feel like I needed it to have a good shot at the matchup. So, but that's another story. That's because Kira is Kira. So,
Yeah, I don't know much about Reapanimator because I've never tried the deck and I've never faced the deck. However, just hearing about it, I do like the idea of Severin in the Reanimator deck because again, as Sunny pointed out, it's a powerful way to reanimate multiple cards in a turn. You don't need to have Azendel. It gives you redundancy, which is useful. It's powerful by itself. If you can't Reanimator, it's useful like with your Katra. If you can't ramp to 8 already, you get to 6 more reliably with your ramp. I think putting Severin in the Reanimator deck is actually seems like a pretty good investment.
all right, let's talk about another deck that I like. This is Kira, and I think that not enough people are playing Kira. It's still extremely powerful. It's not as broken as it was before, but look, they only changed one card from it. The deck is still very good, very powerful, has a lot of play against a lot of different scenarios, and I have to imagine that it's an absolute nightmare to play against still. Like, I haven't seen too many other people playing it, but like they play Hojan with a power up on turn 3. What are you going to do? Attack into it? Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah, the main difference between Kira now and Kira then is not that Kira was nerfed, it's that the metagame has changed. Kira decks are basically the same as they were back in the day. While Xenon was popular a few weeks ago, there wasn't many Severins going around, right? Like popular, the three big decks from before were Kira decks, Xenon decks, and then Stonescar, which took it home. And then you also had like Roshi's nonsense, which was playing Severin, but most decks weren't playing Severin back then. So if Kira has a bad matchup versus Yetis or Severin plus Reap, that would be the big difference in it between then and now. I think it probably has a decent matchup versus Severin, considering it can put the aggression on, as well as have some nice closers. Yetis, I'm less sure on the matchup because I haven't tested it out, but I think that would be an interesting matchup. So if you think Kira has a good matchup versus Yetis, and you already knew how to play the deck, if you already played to 17 wins in the last ECQ or whatever, just take it again. You won't be disappointed probably. You'll probably get a reasonable finish because it's still probably a tier 1 deck.
I've come around to what you said about the deck and that you just shouldn't play Siditi in it. I think maybe one Siditi is fine, but like I've just started playing more Crew Envoy, right?
Yeah.
And I actually am playing a couple of Evangel now. I know I swore off Evangel, but I think like having a couple of them is actually kind of useful. The problem is like Evangel when you need to draw power is just so bad. It feels like the worst thing ever.
Yeah, I just in my version of the deck, I basically played similar to Saintless. I just swapped Siditi for Fearless Crescendo and changed the market slightly to Sunny's original market because I was like Fearless Crescendo acts as a Siditi because it gives me like a big flyer, gives me a flying attacker, which is what I wanted, while not just being clunky Siditi. Siditi is not like terrible, but it's just I don't think it's optimal basically.
Yeah, like games where you have multiple CDDs are generally pretty embarrassing. So that's why I'm like, yeah, you might be able to get away with one. And the curse isn't even that good. Like people try so hard to get that CDT curse because of what it once was, I think, but it's really not that good.
Yeah, it's good in some matchups, but not in many matchups. And the deck's still great, and you should be playing it. So, but you've heard a lot from me and Sunny if you've been listening to the podcast about how good Kira is.
Yeah.
Even as a 2-1, it's still pretty good.
Let's talk about the winner of the last tournament. That is Stonescar. I think Stonescar is still there. It's less susceptible to Blightmoth, but other than that, I think it's probably um not as good as Yetis in most circumstances. But like you just can't ignore Stonescar. It's going to show up in your tournament games. It's going to win some games, and like with a good draw, they have an extremely efficient game plan. I think one big thing is replacing the 2-drops because you probably don't want to be playing Argenport Instigator anymore. I've tried Yeti Pioneer. I think that's one of the best 2-drops there are in Fire. Yeah, I feel like there are mixed results because there's a lot of charge and cards that you want to play before combat, but I think that's probably the replacement. And as far as Cut Purse goes, I think you just want to just keep on playing Cut Purse. If it gets killed, so be it. But its potential damage output is just so incredible.
Yeah, I think that the deck's still pretty much intact. I think the deck's still pretty great. Like you could take Skelly's list from the last ECQ, replace Argenport Instigator with Yeti Pioneer, and probably have reasonable results. Although I think their deck had a little bit too many 4-drops for my taste. But Yeti Pioneer attacks. Afterwards, you play a Jack, you play a Yushkov. Seems fine to me. Again, I think that I don't like how many 4-drops the deck's playing because it's playing 12, but Stonescar was always a bit more on the mid-range spectrum than Yetis was, right? The big difference between Stonescar and Yetis is Yetis plays 1-drops and Stonescar does not. So Yetis is sort of one lower position on the curve.
Yeah.
The big difference, of course, is that Yetis has the best 1-drop in the game now, the premier 1-drop Snowcrest Yeti. But yeah, Stonescar is still great.
Stonescar used to be a deck that you could just play into anything and expect it to do well. And I do like that now it kind of has a weakness into Blightmoth. It's not just totally immune to Blightmoth like it basically was before. So I'm pretty happy about that.
So the next deck is sort of a new up-and-comer. It's a Stonescar Relics or Stonescar Shrine to carve it. Basically, it's another Shrine deck, but this time you're playing some Rat Cages and stuff. I kind of thinking maybe just Stonescar Shrine might be better, but I haven't played the deck too heavily. But I know the deck is doing some cool things on ladder currently.
Yeah, I actually really like this deck. I think it has a lot of potential. Shrine to Carve It is obviously an insane card. But also it makes good use of Reactor Forge. I think I've mentioned on this podcast before. You play Reactor Forge, you get a ton of power, and with a Shrine, you can recoup that life loss, and you can also play something like Strange Burglar in order to make up for the card that you used on the Reactor Forge. So that seems pretty good to me. I'm not quite sure what the best way to build it is, but you probably just want to top out on the Strange Burglar, play a lot of cheap effects like Combust and whatnot, Quarry to help you dig for the rat cages because those seem pretty important. I think this deck has a lot of potential, and I have yet to try it myself. That's on my to-do list before this weekend, but just playing against it, I know a lot of people have been jamming it a bunch on ladder, and it's been impressive.
Just don't skip on your relics. That's the one thing that I think a lot of people and skipping on, right? Like if you look at like classic batteries rats, it's playing like 30 relics. I mean, obviously, I don't think you're going to reach that many relics or relic generating effects in Stonescar, but you don't want to be playing 12. You might not want to be playing 16. I want to be playing like 18 or 20 relics because the more relics you have, the better rat cages. Of course, even if rat cage is sort of a delayed bad Grenadin drone, that's still pretty decent, right? And if it can be a 1-cost assembly line, and if obviously you high roll, it's just really absurd, right?
Yeah. And I've seen Callus in this Stonewright Callus, the one that sacrifices all your units in these types of lists with like Wyatt's Junkyard in the market to get it back. That seems like a pretty cool angle to use. I mean, you can get up to a lot of units in your void really quickly, and then all of a sudden your Katos are making 8/8s. So, like, I think there's a lot to like about this deck.
Do you know if you play Callus and you have a Rat Cage out, does the Callus trigger before or after the Rat Cage?
It triggers before the rat cage, so you have rats left over. I think that's what happened to me in a game. I don't know if it depends on some sort of weird
Okay, okay.
ordering, but I expect that you'd still have the rats afterward, which is probably not what you want.
Well, maybe. I mean, if you have like a Shrine out, you might be able to enjoy having an extra rat left over to attack with.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
But yeah, so other decks to be considered about Sunny. Put Worldpyre down here. I'm unconvinced. Sunny, convince me on Worldpyre.
I put a question mark next to the Worldpyre. I was trying to make like a 50 power Worldpyre work, and it was not going that well. I lost a lot of games, but the games were like actually kind of close and really interesting. So like maybe there's something there, but it's probably just not good enough in Throne.
I mean, is it good enough in Expedition?
I don't know. I don't know what the cards in Expedition are right now.
They're the same as they were before, weren't they?
I guess, but like I've spent a lot more time on Throne than Expedition in the past few months, so
That's fair. That's
I'm
fair.
just a lot more familiar with Throne. So another deck that has question mark next to it is Rats, and I think Rats is very good, but you really have to know how to play it. Like the difference
Yes.
between playing batteries on Rats and playing against anyone else on Rats is just like night and day. You can tell from the other side of the table that it's just a lot easier when it's
Yeah.
not batteries piloting the deck. So if you are really familiar with the deck and you're really comfortable with it, it could be a good choice, but it's not something that I would just try to pick up.
If you're playing batteries with rats, or you're playing like versus me or Sunny with rats, even that difference is still like night and day. Like batteries is just so much better with rats than like most other people. He's just a monster with rats, and rats is probably still a reasonable choice, but you really have to be good at it. It's kind of like there's a couple decks in Magic the Gathering, which I know that I hate to talk about, but I'm going to talk about again. Like Car Clan Ironworks, I think is a classic deck where it was like exceptionally powerful, but also was like exceptionally skill testing.
It really feels like something like that. For me, it feels like Legacy Storm, where you have to know how you're going to kill them like 3 turns in advance. Like, is this a game where you go for, the card X and just pray, or do you have enough resources to go for card Y and kill them for sure, right?
I like the Legacy Storm comparison because there's a lot of like guides for Legacy Storm. It's like here's a flowchart on how to play Legacy Storm, and you can also like have some of those rough guides on how to play Rats too, and you will have reasonable-ish shot, but like it's still like the difference between having that flowchart and like actually knowing how to play the deck because of how many games you played is pretty big.
All right. How about a combo deck that I think that people have a better shot at playing? There's Talir Combo. I haven't seen very much of it, but I have to imagine that it's pretty good if you can build it correctly.
There was actually a lot of them that showed up at the last ECQ, right? Just a lot of people were playing the Zine and Talir combo. I wonder if you should be, what if we, okay, here, this is hot off the press. I hadn't played this right now. What if you combine Severin plus Reap and Talir combo to make Severin Reap Talir combo? Just put all the combos together. Just make a fruit salad.
You have to play a lot of cards that aren't time units for Talir. What do you benefit for playing Severin? You just have another way of winning the game?
Yeah, more combos. Like if Severin's your only shadow unit in the deck, and then you also have Reap.
Watch, it's going to win the tournament.
I know. I'm just bringing it up an FECast randomly. It's going to be great. I mean, I could actually see that being a potentially decent option, right? Like if you're making like one concession to not having time units in your deck, and that's literally just Severin. But anyways, that was more an off-the-cuff thing. I hadn't considered it further. I'm not going to talk about it further. But yeah.
Here's the thing. Now that we are not killing with Vodacon anymore, we're killing with Kairos out of the Talir deck. You don't have to play a deck where you have a million time units. Like Talir plus Kairos draws 6 cards, and then if you hit an etchings off of it, then you can go get your Vodacon or whatever and dome them for 1 million. Like it's just not necessary to have the deck building restrictions that we used to have.
Well, plus actually, people really don't play Vodacon in the market anymore. It's literally just Kairos in the market. I think the other card is Nash in the market, and sometimes you can put back like Echo Dinosaur in the market, whatever. It's very reasonable to not win that turn when you play that, and if they play Harsh or something, you could survive. And right, if you're playing the Severin plus Reap part of it, I don't know why I'm trying to defend this.
But then you can't play Severin. Yeah, sure, you can play it after.
That's a benefit, right? Because a lot of things like you're gonna get enough cards off the deck presumably anyways, because just that's so many cards and so many destinies that you can then have the cards left over in hand. That if they play the harsh rule, you just follow up with Severin plus Reap because presumably you'll have those in hand.
I guess.
Anyways,
this is definitely winning this weekend.
Oh my goodness! No I hope not. I mean, if it wins, I get to prove something wrong. But if it wins, then I also just create a monster. But yeah. So basically, I guess the only reason we're discussing it is because Talir Combo sort of been the like pretty decent, pretty reasonable. Like it got top 4 at the Summer Championship, it got top 8 at the Summer Championship, but also was like unsure what the proper build was, right? So there's still room to innovate in Talir Combo, which is I guess the only reason we started discussing the Severin potentiality.
Yeah, well, I mean, it also won an ECQ, right?
Yeah.
Gauge 1 in the even-handed decks were the metagame then. Even-handed Xenon, that was the big thing.
Even Xenon's metagame. Oh no, we're gonna have, what about even Talir Reap?
No, I don't think so. You need the market cards for Talir so much.
That one's too far, but yeah, I could see Severin being reasonable, but I don't know.
All right, last deck that we are going to talk about today is At Any Cost Combo. I just think it's worth mentioning. I don't know how good this deck is. I just don't have a good sample size for games that I've seen with it. It does have some cool things going for it, and that is like with Prodigious Sorcery, that's just a 1-card kill with your At Any Costs, which are helping you control your game up until that point. So basically, you're just playing a control deck that has a 1-card kill, and I think there's a lot to like about that.
For the longest time, anytime I brought up At Any Cost Combo, Sunny would just be like laughing at me, being like, this card's awful, the deck's awful. And now he's come around to it, so I'm just going to poke him just very slightly, and I'm going to be done with that poking right now. I'm done poking him.
Yes, I will swallow my pride and say Stormblessed was had a lot more credibility when it came to this than I initially thought. And that's just something that, like, that's why you're still on this show, however many episodes later, right? It's because you do end up being right about things a fair amount of the time, even when I think you're wrong. So, I'm happy to swallow my pride and admit that.
Yeah, I don't want to poke somebody too hard because it's not the biggest deal, and like the deck's not tier 1 by any stretch. It's not shooting up the ladder. There's a couple reasons for that. One is that me and Cindy were discussing this. There are some missing cards here. Like if Felon Silex existed before, I think Sunny might have been more keen on the deck as a whole because Felon Silex really will help the deck out a lot. Like it both provides the influence you need, provides another duel so you don't have to play vows, and also is in a control deck that Silex is really powerful. So When we get Felon Silex, the deck will just immediately become much more powerful. In addition, the deck is also one of those incredibly skill testing decks, right? Like if you're playing Ip Longo, that's like way different than playing me or Sunny on at a cost combo control. Because me and Sunny are just would be so much worse the deck because it is a very skill testing deck. So it does depend on the pilot a lot. So it's very much like Rats in that respect.
Yeah, you have to know how to line it up. But I think a bigger hurdle is that you really have to know how to build it. I feel like the magic formula for this deck being where you want it to be, it hasn't been found yet.
Yeah, I'm going to believe that.
I do think that's another challenge.
I think I agree there. It seems like with Talir Combo, except Talir Combo is just easier to build a base form of, if not the perfect form of, where this is much harder to build the base form of.
Yeah. And that's it for our preview of the Last Chance Qualifier. Should be a lot of fun, especially since 4 people are going to be qualifying instead of the usual 1. I hope I get to catch some of the action, and if not, take part. I'm still on the fence as to whether I'll be able to play this weekend or not.
Do you have a 7-win run in the event at least?
I did not turn on my computer yesterday. That's how busy I've been.
Well, if you want to have a chance at playing the event, you do need a 7-win run.
I know. Maybe I'll get to it tomorrow, but maybe not. I've been really busy. Let's just put it that way.
I don't blame you.
Anyway, next week we will know everyone that is qualified for Worlds, and we'll be able to. We should get some other Worlds players here and just do like a draft of the players, a fantasy draft. But yeah, that'll be really cool. We'll get to finally see what it's going to look like. Hopefully we'll have more information on what the format is going to look like the details of it. And yeah, then Stormblessed and I will be hard at work preparing for Worlds.
Next week we will also be discussing the remaining Bastion Rising cards.
Yeah, I guess when we record next week, the set should be out, so we'll have plenty to talk about. No, as if we ever don't have plenty to talk about, we will definitely have plenty to talk about next week. So thanks for listening. Best of luck to everyone battling out there. Be sure to join the Discord because it's a great place to talk about Eternal. And yeah, I think that's about it. So until next time, we will see you in the friend zone. The Friends of Eternal Discord is the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. We have players of all skill and experience levels all happy to help each other out on basically any aspect of their Eternal gameplay. And making all this possible is our generous patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support FECast or Friends of Eternal, consider donating at patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we'll see you in the friend zone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to FECast episode 49. What's the name of this episode? The Last Chance. It's your last chance. It's my last. What's that quote from Shut Up and Dance With Me? This is your last chance.
Oh, I've never seen Shut Up and Dance With Me.
Shut up and dance with me. This woman is my destiny. No, you've never heard that?
Okay.
Okay. All right. I think we're ready now. This is very important.